Oh boy, so I did not expect this. The Montreal Canadiens have been in a pretty great spot the past few weeks. From contending into the Stanley Cup Playoffs to having a stellar one-game win in their first-round series, to inevitably losing with a lot of pride, and having fans and media alike just super proud of the team in general. There's a lot of upwards momentum here with the Montreal Canadiens, and one of the biggest thoughts that everybody keeps on bringing up is whether or not the Habs will be able to do more next year. And the thing is, more. What exactly does more mean? Well, one would assume more means winning more than one game in the Stanley Cup Playoffs. But, might I remind you, the Canadiens were very, very close to missing the Stanley Cup Playoffs in this previous season's worth of play. It's by no means a guarantee that they make it next year, let alone win more than one game in the postseason. But that doesn't mean that we still cannot be proud of what this Canadiens team accomplished. It just begs the question as to what's going to happen later. Now, with this in mind, I wanted to open up a conversation that I saw that was posted about on donlescoulisses.com that goes over one individual who wasn't really too optimistic with the way things panned out for the Canadiens. It is none other than a Montreal goaltending legend, a guy whose name was once that of prosperity in Montreal, Jose Theodore. Yeah, we are talking about some comments made by Theo speaking on the radio. Now, of course, Jose Theodore was at one point the best gosh darn goaltender in the NHL. He had a Hart Trophy to his name. He was the most valuable player in the NHL when he posted up a .931 save percentage and .211 goals against in 67 games played for the Habs in 2002. That was unbelievable, like amazing. Best goalie in the league territory right there. And Jose Theodore continued putting up stellar numbers with various teams like the Habs and the Avs and the Caps and the Wild and the Panthers up until his retirement in 2013. Okay, maybe Theodore wasn't really too great save percentage-wise at the end of his career, but still, he's a guy who was a staple of those late 90s, early 2000s Habs teams. And because he's Quebecois, he does go out there onto the radio and talk about the Habs once in a while, and from what I'm gathering, he usually is pretty critical in the way that he talks about certain hockey angles, particularly in the same way that Jannik Hansen is in Vancouver's radio scene over here on the West Coast. But never mind the greatness that once was Jose Theodore in the National Hockey League. I wanted to go out there and read this article published by Michael Pettit on Dans les Coulisses from last week, talking about how Jose Theodore wouldn't bet on the Canadiens making the playoffs next year. Now, just by reading the title, that in itself is not that hot of a take. Oh, do you think the Canadiens are going to make the playoffs next year? It's fair to say no. They were literally 1 point away from missing it this year. It's not guaranteed in the slightest. This is what the quote reads from 98.5 FM Amateur des Sports. Theodore says, are the Canadiens in the playoffs next year? Aye, that's a very good question. I wouldn't be surprised if they miss. I'm not ready to put $2 in that next year we make the playoffs unless we make changes. There are a few caveats here. It'll take changes to the lineup to increase the chances of making the playoffs, and it makes sense when you think about it. This article says, clearly it'll take a second-line center and also another veteran right-handed D-man to compensate on the loss for David Savard on the blue line. Now, the writer on donlescoulisses.com goes out there and says that, hey, I don't really think that these things are absolutely mandatory for the Canadiens to make the playoffs, but there are some areas of improvement. However, one of the biggest things that people have been bringing up in terms of Montreal Canadiens' potential success in the future is the growth and development of Ivan Demidov. He performed fairly well in his limited NHL stint to open up his career, and the expectation would be that he ends up going and improving. If we scroll down in this article, though, we'll read just exactly what Jose Theodore's thoughts are. In his same column on 98.5, Theo had a lot to say about Lane Hutson and Ivan Demidov. He made several mistakes that you can't make in the playoffs. He made turnovers and chose his moments poorly to go on the attack, Theodore said. Demidov has exceptional talent, but from what I've seen in 5 to 6 games, he needs to go to Laval to eat his crusts, because right now he hasn't given me enough for him to have a guaranteed job with the Habs. The first quote here, I'm assuming Jose Theodore is talking about Lane Hutson, because they're talking about turnovers and bad moments to choose when to pinch and stuff, and Lane Hutson did do a little bit of that, especially towards the end of the series against Washington. And yeah, I think it's fair to say that those are mistakes that you can't make in the playoffs. Does that discredit from what Lane Hutson has done all season, though? I'd say probably not. It is just a point of contention where you have to say, yeah, is he a bona fide #1 MVP caliber type talent just yet? I'd say no, but there is room to grow here. Lane Hutson's a rookie after all. He is not really supposed to be perfect. If anything, he was as close to perfect as he could have been as a first-year NHL player. But it's really interesting how Theodore calls out Demidov at the same time and says, yeah, I didn't see enough out of him in order to fully believe he is an NHL player next year. Is he an AHL caliber guy? I feel like there were some, maybe a little bit more than some, bad habits that Ivan Demidov displayed in the NHL this season. In particular, his very first game against Chicago, the 2-point first period was incredible, but then when Chicago was getting their comeback on, that's when Ivan Demidov just kind of stopped up and he slowed down on the back check. That particular non-back checking moment was very defining of the young Russian's transitional period and what kind of adjustments need to be made to his mindset when thinking about the game in the NHL versus the KHL. The non-back check was a pretty big deal, and there were some other moments, I think in Demidov's second game as well, where he didn't necessarily look too great, but there were moments on the power play where he did start to get his swagger on a little bit more. In the playoffs, we saw when Demidov was on the first unit power play with Hudson, Caulfield, Suzuki, and Slavkovsky, that is when everything worked just extraordinarily well. I think it's also fair to say that that guy, with the talent that he has no business even sniffing the AHL. So even though Jose Theodore might say that I don't think I've seen enough out of him to guarantee an NHL spot, I think at the very bare minimum, if you play Demidov in the AHL, he's probably going to look like the best player that league has ever seen, and then he's probably going to earn his way back up into the Montreal Canadiens lineup very shortly after. The preseason seems to be where everything is going to go down, assuming Ivan Demidov has a proper offseason with training that is appropriate for the Canadiens' level. Once the preseason comes, and once this guy maybe scores a highlight reel goal or two, then I think he's probably going to get his spot on the team, and he's probably going to contend for the Calder. He might even win it. I mean, who knows if any of the other young prospects have anything to say about that. Beckett, Sennecke, anybody? But still, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Jose Theodore critiquing and calling out Ivan Demidov in this way, saying that he would probably start Demidov in the AHL if he had the choice right now. This is not guaranteed to last until the start of next season. Opinions can change, and evaluations can change. It's all fluid, after all. But for now, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about Jose Theodore's talk on Ivan Demidov? Do you agree? Disagree? Let me know in the comments. What do you think? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.